Hello everyone, Grounded 2 is just around the corner and here's over 50 things you will want to know. First up, 2 years have passed since the teams originally shrunk themselves down in Grounded 1. We also know that Omni-Tool, the evil company from the first game, is making a return back in Grounded 2. However, the lady did say formally evil, so we're not sure quite what role they will play in the story, but they have definitely made a return. We do see multiple instances of their logo all throughout the trailer. Then in regards to other characters, we do know for sure the 4 teens are making a return, with Max, Pete, Willow, and Hoops, and of course they are 2 years older than they were in the first game. We do also know that Dr. Tully and Burgle will also be a part of the game in some capacity, as they were actually present at the explosion here in the park, and the park is known as Brookhollow Park. Now we don't know exactly what role they will play, whether it's just going to be that they were present at the explosion and now it's up to us to figure things out on our own, since it is 2 years later and we've actually experienced this before. And in order to do that, we're going to have to do a whole lot of exploring. Now when it comes to exploring Brookhollow Park, it's a park in 1992, and we know for sure that there are multiple labs making a return, as we get multiple different shots of that throughout different trailers we've seen. We do also know there's going to be plenty of landmarks to explore. Things we've seen for sure are going to be the hot dog cart. Then we also got to see a new picnic table here in the park. There's the garbage can, which also has a stench similar to the trash can from the first one, so most likely you're going to need to wear a gas mask or a new piece of armor to help you with that. We've seen the ice cream cart that's tipped over, which is going to have a new frozen biome and completely changes everything in it with frozen tunnels. Then there's also been a mention of anthills being in the game again, and speaking of making a return, we also know there's going to be some sort of water or pond area to explore. Then we also saw there's a giant statue. We can see there's also a shed or a greenhouse in the top left corner. And then lastly, there's going to be the giant tree. And for anyone that plays the first game, you know the giant tree was a pivotal location to know, because that is where the main lab was located, where you could find Burgle, turn in all your rewards from the labs, unlock new gear, and even get quests. Well, the quests eventually were worked out to where you could basically just complete them automatically, but it was a main central area you needed to be aware of. It was also one of the very best base locations in the game, just due to how high up you could build and have awesome zipline towers all throughout. Oh, and speaking of ziplines, they will be in the game, but they will not be in the game at launch. They want you to use some of the new features prior to rolling out these ziplines, and we'll dive into those in just a little bit. Now, when it comes to launch details, the game is in early access or game preview, and it will be officially released for day 1 on July 29th, 2025 on the Xbox Series X, S, and PC, and available day 1 via Game Pass, which is how I'm going to be playing the game. It's going to be priced at $29.99 if you're looking to buy it outright, or basically $30. When it comes to PC, though, unfortunately, it will not be available at launch. Most likely it'll follow the same path it did with Grounded 1, where it'll be in early access or game preview for 1 or 2 years and come out at a later point in time. At least, hopefully, that's the case. Now, when it comes to playable space or world size, we know for sure this game is 3 times the size of the playable space in Grounded 1. But on launch day, the space we'll get is actually going to be equivalent to the entire playable space of Grounded 1. Basically, everything they did over the course of 4 years for Grounded 1, we're going to have that much playable space on launch day, which is epic. We don't know how full the space will be, but we know there's a lot of returning features, things like mixars, for example, which I'll dive into later on. We know there's a lot of things that we love from the first game that are coming back, and plenty of new things to do. Now, speaking of new things, there are new bugs, which usually comes with new armor, new weapons, and a whole lot of new ways to play. And yeah, some of these things are terrifying. You've got scorpions, at least 2 different variants. There's a cockroach that's being introduced. We know for sure there's going to be a standard praying mantis. Basically, it's going to be walking around, which is pretty intimidating. And that's just the tip. We all know all the other previous bugs are also being reworked. We've got to see different shots of the wolf spider, for example, having new details added onto it, new details of the bee, new details of the ladybug, for example, and even some of the gear like the ladybug shield being added. Ladybugs didn't have a shield prior, ladybirds did, so we know new gears coming with even some of the basic enemies from Grounded 1 that we didn't have previously. And speaking of new gear, we know for sure there's going to be 10 brand new armor sets introduced in the game. And the fact that we've only talked about a couple of new bugs either means they've just added on to previous armor sets, or for sure there's just more bugs that are confirmed that we just haven't been able to see yet. So overall though, really exciting. Also lots of fan favorites like the Weevil, and again the Ladybug is definitely going to be making a return. And speaking of bugs, we've got to talk about the new buggy system, the ability to now ride bugs. In early access or at launch here on July 29th, we know for sure there's going to be 2 different bugs you'll have access to, the Red Soldier Ant and the Orb Weaver. The Red Soldier Ant will be available much earlier on, and you'll have to do quite a bit of work in order to unlock the Orb Weaver based upon conversations with the developers. Now there's a few things you'll want to know about these buggies. First up, for the Red Soldier Ant, we know for sure while riding them, they can actually harvest resources for you, meaning you can go through and save on the durability of your tools because they can actually gather for you, they can carry things for you, and they even have their own inventory, making you able to carry even more resources early on. So just making gathering and efficiently collecting different things throughout the yard a much more seamless process. And on top of that, we also know for sure they can go through and break open new areas of the yard, and they can recruit up to 2 basic red ants to assist you, whether that be with combat or exploration. Then when it comes to the Orb Weaver, we know that they are much more geared towards exploration and combat. They deal high damage in combat scenarios, and they also have the ability ability to traverse things like web bridges found throughout the yard. And then additionally, it is important to note that they can in fact die or temporarily be sent back to base. If you're playing on easy or medium difficulty, they will be sent back to your base and will actually have a cooldown period before you're able to use them again. But if you're playing on the most difficult difficulty, they will permanently die and you will then need to get yourself a new buggy. You can't have multiple buggies at once. They haven't specified a specific amount quite yet, but just be aware if you want a super hard challenge and you play every survival game on the hardest difficulty, your buggy can in fact die, so you will need to be strategic with them. And then lastly, being kind of a pet or a companion, you can also name them. You can build them nests or little homes similar to how you had pets in the first game. And lastly, if you so choose, you can pet them. So if you want to pet your spider, by all means go for it. I definitely will not be doing that, but I will probably pet my little red ant friend. Now, I just talked about the durability of your tools with the red soldier ant, but it's important to know there's a major change coming in Grounded 2. Instead of having your basic harvest tools like your axe, your hammer, or your shovel, every single harvest-like tool has now been combined into one tool called the Omni-Tool, meaning most likely there's going to be far less crafting and scavenging of resources to get those different tiers, as they're all combined into just the one Omni-Tool. Now, I think there's pros and cons to this. For example, going to the termite den to officially be able to get your termite axe the very first time was a huge reward. So I do hope that we still see those really nice elements of progression. Maybe we have the Omni-Tool, and by doing different things throughout the yard, it unlocks new different possibilities using the tool. Maybe new unlocks gives it the ability to crack additional resources. That would be really cool. So I really hope that it's not just giving you everything from the get-go, but I do appreciate the fact that your inventory will be significantly cleaner because every tool will just be combined into one, meaning you actually have more room to carry the valuable resources or healing items that you so choose out on your adventure. Now, speaking of tools and resources, you typically need all those because you want to build, and building bases in Grounded is definitely making a return. We got to see quite a few different elements throughout, and we know for sure there's going to be at least 2 new building types in the game. We saw so many different new materials in the game, but we know for sure there's going to be a new wall variant, as we get to see the window wall variant here, and then we see there's a slope roof variant here. We know for sure in Grounded 1 that the walls were never actually the same material as the slanted roofs, so you had your crow feathers, your pine cones, and your clovers on roofs, and you had like your stems and your grass on the walls. And it looks like they probably have a similar blueprint style building system, which was probably one of the best building systems I've ever used in a survival game. Oh, and speaking of building, as I mentioned previously, zip lines will not be in the game, and the reason for that is they want you to utilize the buggies. They are looking to just gather as much feedback as possible around the buggies so they can fine tune it, and then eventually they will plan on adding even more buggies and zip lines in the future. Now, when it comes to combat, there's been a huge revamp for combat overall. Some things will be making a return. For example, we know things like slashing damage or stabbing damage or different elemental types will all be coming back and playing a role in this game. So we can expect that most enemies will still have 1 or 2 specific weaknesses, and we can tailor our gear around trying to take those enemies down. But we now have new archetypes or classes in the game. We've got to see the rogue, for example, with 2 different daggers, or a mage with these staffs. Mages were in Grounded 1, but probably one of the most underutilized classes because there just wasn't a lot of options for them. So I'm really hoping, well actually I feel like just looking at the gameplay we've seen so far, that it's going to be completely revamped and really give the ability to basically fully invest into that role through different armor upgrades and even mutations. And we do know for sure that mutations are making a comeback here in Grounded 2, and they will have a similar progression style unlock system as they did in Grounded 1, and we do know for sure there's at least 4 different loadouts. So similar to the first game, you should be able to swap your mutations on the fly for maybe a traversal setup or a combat setup, or maybe being a harvesting or a building setup. Oh, and I mentioned the mix-R events earlier, so we know for sure mix-Rs or defense events are coming back. That doesn't say anything about raids, but if defense or mix-Rs are coming back, I would almost be positive that raids most likely will be making a return. Hopefully though, they fix the system for raids because it was very random. In Grounded 1, you could kill 50 ants and not have a raid, and then you could kill 2 wolf spiders and you could have a raid. But yeah, it should be coming back. Hopefully though, it's definitely improved in Grounded 2. Now, speaking of combat, we do also know, based on the mutations that we saw here, that there is going to be a new tarantula boss in the game. They didn't specifically say, as far as I'm aware, if that will be there on launch day, but we do get to see that it's going to be a requirement or something for one of the mutations. Obviously, I'm not going to rush to it on day 1 because I want to enjoy, the progression system, because it does have a really nice progression system with story elements. And speaking of elements, we don't know how the story is going to work. In Grounded 1, you are very much tied to progression. You could go through and defeat different bugs around the yard, but you couldn't unlock everything until you had the lab upgrades, so you would have to go through and progress in the story before you could get certain elements. And I'm sure that will be tied specifically to how we unlock the Ore Weaver buggy pet, but we just don't know how that's going to work in Grounded 2 yet. Now, lastly, it's important to know that they have mentioned there will be a public roadmap for the future, but they're going to take their time with updates. When it comes to content updates, they're going to slow them down to really fine-tune them, listen to all of our feedback, and basically release them in the best state possible. So I am really excited. Let me know in the comments what you are looking forward to most. yourselves and if you'll be playing on day 1. And if you enjoyed today's video, then please consider leaving a like and subscribing for future Grounded 2 content.